Okay, so in order to progress with assignment 1, what I would urge you is to look at the last collaborate session, especially for those students who are on campus, well, everybody, especially the second part of the collaborate session, where we talk about how to evaluate your own literacy activity. Okay, so in this video I am summarizing the things we've done to have a sort of text, black and white sort of text, so that it's tangible and you can actually re-look at it. And then also I move on a little bit towards the assignment activity and how to assess your literacy activity. So here's a little bit of a summary. Here's the summary. You can read it for yourselves. I don't have to actually spend 3 hours on this video talking about it. There's more summary, more summary, more summary, more summary, more summary, right? Then there is this picture. I, for some reason, included it here. All it shows to you, this is a very prestigious lecture in the Royal Institution of London, where scientists present work to the community to actually update the community on their own work. Community is paying for it, right? In tax money pays for scientists to actually do all this weird research. And what this professor is showing here on this picture, it's how the brain actually processes information, and you can see there is no direct line between the world outside and the brain. What the brain does is actually doesn't react on the objective reality. What it does, it acts always on its own interpretations of what it thinks it's coming in relation to a specific goal that you are pursuing, which means in relation to the expected reality, right? So it's literally ongoingly or continuously an inner work. It is. I mean, this person, Until Self, basically says that we hallucinate the objective world, right? We hallucinate. He's actually on TED Talks. So it's rather than watch the whole hour of his big lecture, you can actually go on TED Talks and find his name. So if you are interested, you don't have to do it for this unit. But basically what we are saying is that we always act on our interpretive systems, right? So we're never really reading the reality. And this is the problem with Vygotsky. Vygotsky was thinking that we actually act on objective reality. That's why he's teaching behaviors. Step by step, that he's teaching behaviors. We will teach you behaviors. And also he's talking about through language. Well, you don't actually, because you have many sensory data that is coming, that is actually mapped out on your brain. So you actually are a multisensory person. Language doesn't translate everything, right? So anyway, if it was all language, you would be hitting continuously the left hemisphere with a language, but you have so many systems on which you rely as you interpret reality, as you say it. So you have to provide multisensory activities. Now, it is no wonder for people who already are working in early childhood, because you have all these concepts, that people are multisensory, but somehow we lose it. So it's very important. We actually interpret information. We have many senses in order to use all the senses. So language itself will not translate the reality or translate anything to a student. It is a help. It might be a help, but it needs to, like any tool, has to be used intelligently. So just to summarize once again, we act on our own interpretations, internal interpretations. We continuously are locked in our own interpretations. So there's some more summary about Vygotsky and what neuroscience data says here. Now I forgot to type here, so let's call it you're evaluating your it would pay if I actually type that, your literacy activity, right? So basically I have explained in the collaborate session that the model basically says as follows. The curriculum has 3 dimensions: capabilities, priorities and the content. The Australian curriculum, how people work with the curriculum, there is no Bible of how to work with the curriculum. There's no process. Curriculum is just a compromise, and what happened, it is now laid out to lecturers, researchers to actually find for teachers best ways to interpret and work with the curriculum. So I will teach you my way. You don't have to marry it. You can, after this unit, throw it away and never look at it again. I'm very happy, but what I want you to do is to engage with this way of working with the curriculum so that you can have, when you are out there in a profession, you actually have gone through different experiences in our university to work with the curriculum, and then later on you can either mix and match them, or you can choose one. Right, so this is the one that I'm giving you. It's based actually on theoretical work of Bourdieu, Pierre Bourdieu, who was a greatest sociologist, but it's also based on other disciplines. I put it all together in order to give you just a summary and a nice process. So here it goes. Australian curriculum, as I see it, is not interested in you teaching content. Right? It sounds like a heresy, but it isn't. If you can see how the Australian curriculum is actually constructed, what Australian curriculum wants you to do is to teach higher order thinking skills. At the end of the day, whether you teach transition or grade 5 or grade 12, what they want is for your students to pop out with higher order thinking skills, right? All these wonderful things like social and personal capacities, general creativity, all of that, right? And you know that your students cannot demonstrate the creativity and intercultural awareness and all of that without actually working with some materials. So that's why you need content. You need content as a context in relation to which students demonstrate all these capabilities, right? But really, they have to demonstrate the capabilities, not the content. And that's really a different way of looking at it. I don't think that it's a different way than the curriculum wants it. It's just a different way that very often is presented in the literature. We're too preoccupied with questions like how to teach punctuation as opposed to how to teach higher order thinking skills. If you teach higher order thinking skills, now imagine projects pull in a lot of information, right? And because projects have a purpose, that purpose gives meaning to all those little bits and pieces that as opposed to teaching little bits and pieces without anybody knowing how to put it all together, right? So whatever you do in life, putting things together is the hardest thing. So I give you an example. When I wrote my PhD, I had all the sections written. I just didn't know what it all meant. And it took me many years, sadly, to actually put it all together in synchronize, to find common threads between. I kind of could talk about it, but I couldn't really find the sentence, the core. And it was really hard. So teaching content, great. What does it mean to people? Nobody knows, right? But the project allows to actually rein in all these different bits from content and direct it towards actually executing the purpose of the project, right? So that's in a summary. So basically, what we have, we teach higher order thinking skills. We teach it in the context of activities that engage make indigenous connections, Asia connections, create sustainability links, and also sustainability is not just only about the environment, it's also about, it also has community building orientation. So basically, if you create websites, if you create connections with the community, right, it has that sustainability aspect. So activities which have all these aspects that aiming to teach capabilities, and you use content in order to achieve the capabilities goals in the context of the activities that have the orientation towards the cross-curriculum priorities, right? So we teach higher order thinking skills in the context of activities that have cross-curriculum priorities orientation, and we use content in order to do that. So the content is basically frames of reference. They're references that we engage in order to achieve. So we don't teach text in context, we enable students to engage capabilities, and they use text in context, for example, an aspect of the content, in order to actually demonstrate the higher order thinking skills. Now that's assignment 2, so we're not touching it now. This is just for you to understand how the 3 dimensions work together. You don't have to read that. That was from well, I will leave it actually. That was from the collaborate session, but basically, no, I will not leave it. Okay. So I have given you here a link. So this PowerPoint is on the announcements. This link will take you to the curriculum, and you can actually, and I have shown in the collaborate session how to work with it. It's pretty straightforward. So you have language literacy and English there, but English is like literature, right? So, so you go to that link, and you can actually click on different things, and it will give you information about what the curriculum means under each of those concepts. And I'm happy for this particular unit to just work with the explanations of the curriculum. I mean, if it was a 1-year unit, we would work exactly with terms like what is genre, what language variation actually means, language for interaction, right? We would actually try to unpack all of that. I'm happy with the way it is in the curriculum. So why do I have a differentiation here between the first layer and second and third? Because the first layer, you can see it deals with personal and social capabilities. However, it is explained in the curriculum in the way that I work with you and suggest for you to actually consider is that every activity has its purpose, right? So you engage in an activity in order to effect a purpose. You want to make someone happy, or you want to produce information for some community, like in here. So what you will need to do, and I'll show you next, is first to identify your own needs in relation to this transformative, in relation to this purpose of the activity. You have to actually map out your needs in relation to literacy, language, and English, which is the literature, the document you have to read or consider in order to actually produce a brochure that looks like a brochure, as opposed to an advertisement, right, or a newspaper. So so first you need to actually, the first activity will be to actually create a map in relation to literacy, language, and English of your needs in order to actually go about a particular activity. So you can see that this is taking you away already from the comfort. I know what it takes. I know everything. Yeah, everybody knows everything until we all fail, right? Not the unit, but we fail in real life. And then we're very busy covering up and sending excuses and all of that. So when I'm saying this, we want to evaluate our activities. So what we're learning now is a systematic approach to do so. So what we're now trying to do when we actually are identifying the personal and social capabilities here, we're trying to actually find a neutral way away from your assumptions, and we're trying to look at the bits and pieces, text in context, interacting with others, and all of that, in a way that is away from your assumptions, but it's actually referring back to the curriculum. So you use the curriculum, you translate the information in the curriculum in a way that helps you understand your needs for this particular activity. Not what you do, but what you should do, right? Because in order to evaluate anything, you have to have a perfect image, and you evaluate it with yourself. And then you will write to me a story saying to me, oh, look at this, I meet these needs, but I don't meet those needs, right? And that's what evaluation is. Evaluation is not to say how great you are, because I'm not judging you, I'm not giving you a job. I just want to know whether you can actually identify the gap between the perfect requirement and how you go about the requirement, and whether you can do it systematically using the curriculum. That's what I want. So you can see the reason why we have to have this perfect image versus you, it's because the personal and social capabilities are talking about transformative impact. So in order for your engagement in a particular activity to have a transformative impact, you have to have some ideal. What it would take to do that brochure, for that brochure to have an informative impact on the community, right? What would it take to actually do it well? And then the next thing what I would like you to do is now, in order to actually fill this bit here with more information, I would like you to actually write up a little bit what materials you would use in order to reflect the demographics of your what materials would be necessary to be engaged in here to reflect the picture of the community justly, and also what range of materials would be good to use in order to actually do the design of the brochure in a way that is creative and critical. And by critical, I mean you considered a range of questions so that your brochure is not simple, that there is a difference between a brochure created by a 30-year-old as opposed to a 3-year-old, right? A 3-year-old has can be critical and creative, but within the range of experiences that they are capable of juggling with, whereas you can do more, right? So I want to see the range, which means the diversity of opinions that you have actually included. So basically, first we'd identify the needs, what materials, and then what you do, you create a table next to it, and you can actually, or you can do a little, you can create the table of the needs using this kind of picture. So you can create the table of the needs, and then you can actually produce a little text which actually is a self-assessment in relation to those needs, right? So you don't have to have two tables, you can have two tables, or you can have just a little story after you have created the map of needs. Make it as short as possible, it is fine with me. It doesn't have to be, like a PhD thesis. All I want to see is engagement in those terms. So once you created a kind of a table of the needs and of the materials required, right? Then you can create another table like this and say how you engage those, or you can just create a little story. A table makes things a bit neater because we can see it all at once. But if you want to create just a paragraph or two underneath your table and say how you actually engage in each of those needs, then it's fine with me, I don't mind. So here's a summary. Pick an activity like creating a brochure for remote communities. Identify the purpose of that activity, right? Every activity has a purpose, and very often we forget about it, but because we are used to just doing things, doing templates. So identify the purpose of this activity, like creating a brochure. Notice that I'm repeating this, right? So creating a brochure for remote to inform, in order to inform. Just to make it a bit more clear. Creating a brochure for remote communities in order to inform them about health services available in the area. So what you will be doing when you actually consider the needs of yours, which is to actually unpack the concept of what would make a brochure informative in the context of remote communities, right? So you will be unpacking that in your personal and social capabilities, which is what is it that I need to know in relation to literature, language, and English, or documents, right? I wrote it in English because that's curriculum has it, but yeah. what I need to know to create a brochure for remote communities in order for it to be informative to that community. So when you have language, for example, here, you might actually, what structures will you be using? Language for interaction. So explore those terms and think, should it be just in English? Should it have English and maybe indigenous? Since indigenous is difficult because you'd have to find an informant who would translate, what kind of concepts, what kind of tools could you use in order for to increase the meaningfulness of that particular brochure? One thing I suggested, in fact, was maybe to distribute with the brochure. Look, we're living in this mobile, in this ICT world, so maybe actually create a website where the brochure is actually read out loudly, because a lot of indigenous people might have oral competence, but not necessarily capacity to read in English. So, and not all communities, remote communities, are deprived of the internet. Some do have internet, and I understand that a lot of Aboriginal people do have iPads. So anyway, look, you don't have to have a website for 100% of Aboriginal people. If say 2 or 3 make use of the internet connection, that's great. I mean, that's fine, because sometimes we produce text, so different things for different people. So you understand, so you assess your own needs in relation to the purpose of the activity, the purpose, right? So what would make a brochure, right? What would make it relevant for remote communities, and then how to make it informative. So then you identify the needs, your needs in relation to this community brochure. Then you need to identify the kinds of materials. You need to identify other materials for it to be based, to approach the purpose of the activity in an informed way, right? What is the range of perspectives, concepts, evidence, disciplines that you engaged to act informed, or for your activity to look actually like produced by an intelligent person, a person who actually has done some work to do it well. Right, so some of you who never actually produced a brochure for a remote community would be dead here, right? So that's fine. Write about something that you actually do, not about something that you have no idea how to actually perform an activity. So this is the nutshell. Is it difficult? Absolutely. That's a second-year assignment, and here you are required, in terms of the learning outcomes, you are required to apply concepts. So the concepts here you have higher order thinking skills, cross-curriculum capabilities, and how to work with the content of the curriculum to actually engage the capabilities and the cross-curriculum priorities. You work also with the Australian curriculum terms, which is about those text in context and all of that. You will explore the curriculum. You can use this link in order to actually go, you tick a particular year that you would like, maybe the year 12, I don't know, or year 10, it doesn't really matter. Just tick any year, because it will give you enough of, each of them will give you similar explanation of all these terms, and you can actually write your own story, your own analysis. If you're doing an activity that engages a specific person of a particular age, then you click on that particular age of that grade, on the particular grade of which the person is relevant to this particular person with whom you might be doing the activity, and then you get precise information from the curriculum. So that I produced here, so this is your the blue text, the text in blue, say in relation to the to literacy strand. I produced kind of, look, I've done it 2 years or 3 years ago. I'm no longer married to any of this, but these were just sort of thoughts I had on my mind of how to work with concepts like text in context, in relation to ethical and critical, ethical and intercultural capability, or critical and creative. So this, the blue is your needs analysis, and then the ethical and critical here, the two other ones, are the kinds of materials you would need to use in order to actually describe your needs in a more informed way, and then analyze as a result. So I did some description here in literacy, in language, and in literature. You have it in your module 2. Yeah, use it critically or don't use it, it's fine, as long as you use the Australian curriculum. I will produce a separate lecture for early years learning framework, but at this very moment I just wanted to introduce, you have a lecture I think on early years learning framework on in your module 2, but I will still produce an updated one for this year. But at this very moment, I just wanted to introduce the concept of how to actually go about evaluating your own activity. So you create a needs analysis of yours in relation to the curriculum, and then you see how you perform this activity in your daily life, and or whatever, every week or every year, and how it actually matches with the needs of the activity itself, right? What is it that you should be doing, and what is it that you are doing, right? And then you can actually, in a systematic way, evaluate your own performance. Systematic because it's in relation to the Australian curriculum. Now it will take at least one collaborate and one on-campus class to actually do the analysis, but what I would prefer is people to actually test it on discussion board, and see how we go, so that we actually together can struggle with that. Additional text, well, I produced some additional text here for you, a few slides, nobody has to read them. It's anything after this slide you can just ignore, right? I just put it there because I had those materials, I've typed them. So since I've typed them, I wanted to leave them in this PowerPoint just in case some of you might find it interesting or relevant to your life, so you can actually browse through the rest of slides. But there's absolutely no compulsion, it is not compulsory. Okay, so much for now. You can see that the assignment 1 became a little bit more complex. It is very complex. We will be applying terms, applying concepts, and one thing I want you to do is not to think about the assignment and how am I going to teach it, This is not about how you're going to teach. That's assignment 2. This is about, I would like to ask you to just focus on the requirement of the assignment 1, which is what is literacy, and you always, your concepts, your evaluations, you always refer back to the construct to the concept of literacy as you actually define it. So you don't talk about pedagogy, you talk about the concept of literacy. We were analyzing Adam, and we were analyzing the task by Alan Luke in terms of the concept of literacy. So that, and then you look at how you approach literacy in your particular chosen literacy activity, right? So what should be and what you actually do, and you compare these two. Okay, not too bad. Makes life more interesting, doesn't it? Now another thing is, this is not about doing it perfectly. This is not about getting it done as if you had already 300 PhDs in literacy. This is about attempting to think in those terms and attempting to engage in the subject ELA 200. So I had, over the semesters, I had students doing it one way, another way, and another way. I had students who kind of did a variation on this model because they got sort of involved in the mathematics of it. It's fine. I just need to see and exploratory and critical thinking of ELA 200 students, which is you, and an attempt to actually think critically. What I want to say is someone who is actually trying to struggle with Australian curriculum and work with it in a way that challenges you, and brings actually all the three dimensions of the curriculum together, which is content, capabilities, and priorities. Yes, because you do assess your activity also, how much it actually, when you assess your activity, do remember to also, I didn't write it because kind of sometimes I take too many things for granted, but you do test also. So here we go, we have to make it smaller now. We need to actually assess the context in terms of cross-curriculum priorities, right? So how many, whether your activity does have a community orientation, community development orientation, does it have sustainability, does it have Asian connection, does it have indigenous connection? Some of that will come through the analysis of the materials that you need to actually evaluate or explore in order to actually perform the activity well. But yes, we need to actually do cross-curriculum priorities. And this is a nice way. All right, so much from me for today. I hope this is food for thought, and we'll take it from there.